Hello and welcome to this conversation with our special guest today, which is all going to be about leading with purpose. Now, before I introduce our special guest today, who is a wonderful friend of mine and colleague over many, many years, just by way of introductions, I'm Jamie. I'm the Executive Chairman of Digital Transformation Specialist C-Learning. And what that means is I get to spend my days working with extraordinary people doing remarkable work that matters. And I have the privilege of working with such people. Often around big transformational change, but it's a really exciting way to spend your day. And we're going to dig into some of the themes that maybe come out of that during the conversation today. But before I do that, I'm going to introduce my, I call you co-host, don't I, Chris, in these conversations, my colleague, Chris. Yep. Do you want to introduce yourself, Chris?
The more of these we do, have you noticed, the more kind of co-host. I want to be the host.
Oh, you can be the host today.
We know it'll never happen. Yeah. Hi, for anybody who doesn't know me, I'm the Product Solutions Manager for C-Learning. So anything related to tech that makes people's lives simpler and easier, which I guess will hopefully lead to more, happy workers from a safeguarding perspective as well. Maybe, just everything that goes along with that. So yeah, great to be on the call today. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, brilliant. And we will share discussion points between us as we go through. But now it gives me great pleasure to formally introduce, as formal as I ever get anyway, my friend and colleague, Trudie McGuinness. And I've known Trudie, as we were just chatting before we started the recording today, and I've known Trudie for well over 20 years or so now, which is a bit scary to think about from my point of view, where time is whizzing by. And in all the time I've known Trudie, she's always had a moral compass that points towards doing work that matters. And what I mean by that in the context of the conversation today is that Trudie's CV, if I can put it that way, and background is just extraordinary. And we're going to dig into that during the conversation today. But Trudie has spent decades and is still a leading safeguarding specialist and practitioner, and has held many senior executive roles in education where she's had overall responsibility as a senior safeguarding officer, making sure people are safe and dealing with all of the complexities that come out of that. And we might explore a bit of that today. Trudie is also a certified coach, and most recently, and is currently the chief executive and founder of, in my opinion, the best safeguarding company in the country, which is the Essential Safeguarding Company. So if you, and I'm not, this is not a paid promotion as we were talking about earlier, but if you really do want to talk to anybody about advice and guidance and support on how to handle the most complex or tricky safeguarding issues or training and support for your teams, then absolutely Trudie and Emma and all of the team at the Essential Safeguarding Company should be top of your list. But on top of that, Trudie also does some extraordinary things in terms of Trudie is a Toastmaster as well, and is one of the first Toastmasters to be blazing a trail for females in that particular industry, if I can call it that. Trudie, have I done it justice by way of explaining there just what being a Toastmaster is? You're one of the first female Toastmasters, aren't you, I believe? Is that right?
I think you have done it justice. And yes, sometimes people say to me, what is a Toastmaster? And indeed, that was the very first question that I put to a Toastmaster when I met him in advance of my dear friend Charlotte's wedding about, 6-7 years ago. And he was standing there at the wedding fair with his amazing red livery on. And I was very attracted to the red being my favorite color. I was like, gosh, look at you, who are you? And he explained who he was. I was like, well, what do you do? And he described his role at the wedding, which was about really helping guests to feel welcomed, to know what is expected, what's coming up, to do the formal introductions, for the speeches, for the entrances, for the cutting of the cake and dancing. Now, all of these key words being music to my ears, people, dancing, cake. I was like, oh my gosh, like who doesn't want to, be involved in some of these things? And I started to ask him about what was involved in being trained. And he told me, and he was very generous and gave me details of how to go about being trained. And I made inquiries, and post-COVID, once they could have training courses again, I was eagerly on the course. And I have loved being a Toastmaster ever since. I'm very proud to be sitting now on the committee of the Guild of Professional Toastmasters.
I think that's incredible. And what I love about it, and perhaps we'll touch on this during the conversation, but in all the time I've known you, you've always had this. You've got this real sort of immense courage about putting yourself out of your comfort zone and into situations that are challenging and stimulating and pushing yourself and pushing the boundaries, like being the Toastmaster. It's a very male dominated profession from what I understand, or at least the history of it seems to be. It may be changing now thanks to people like yourself, but it's incredible that you did it. And I can only imagine the kind of thinking on your feet kind of situations that you have to deal with when given weddings are complicated logistical arrangements. I can imagine you've had to deal with a fair few challenges around that, and maybe we'll come on to that in a bit. But in terms of this conversation, me and Chris have got a bunch of discussion themes, if I can call it that, that we want to dig into with you today. I didn't even mention in the introduction, by the way, of course, you have a whole political career as well, because you've been politically active, if I can put it that way, all of the time I've known you over decades. You've been a recent political candidate, and if I got my way, I would love to see you prime minister one day. I think you would lead with heart and conviction and be all everything that you sort of hope a prime minister could be, really. So yeah, I think that's absolutely awesome. So I'm going to start with the first question, if that's okay, Chris, and I'll hand over to you for the second one, really. And it kind of follows on nicely from the introduction, as you might expect, really, in some ways, in that your journey has sparked so many different areas, Trudie, from education to political activism, coaching. I'm intrigued by, in your own words, what was the spark that drove you down this common theme in everything you've done, which is public service, and also combining personal challenges I was just alluding to about putting yourself out there into difficult situations? Because it would have been much easier, let's face it, if you just kept an executive job in education. Instead you took yourself out of that, founded a company, pioneered being one of the first female Toastmasters in the country, took on coaching, and have done all this public service and political commitments to try and make the world better as well. What's the spark that drives you? Is it coffee?
I do love a good coffee, I have to say. And in fact, I'm doing a VIP day tomorrow with a coachee of mine in Chester. And my question to the venue, which is hosting us, is like, how good is your coffee? That's critical for the day. Very important. What I would say is, for me, it's about listening to the nudge of my heart and not being able to ignore that thing inside me, which is about my interest, a sense of calling, where my passions lie. And for a long time, I was kind of scared to use that kind of language because I thought it sounded a little bit esoteric, shall we say. But actually, that is the truth of it. Listening into who am I really? And if I think about things that replenish me and what I've learned about myself, it isn't, I was away last week. It isn't going and lying on a beach and not doing anything. It's going and seeing different things to my everyday life, but seeing things from a different perspective, visiting different places, talking to different people, engaging in different activities. And that acts as a sense of renewal for me. So listening to my heart and the things which make, and listening to what happens inside, the tummy flip, where you're just like, oh, and that's a bit exciting and interesting and like a little bit scary, because I feel what's happening inside me is I'm being nudged towards that, but I don't know what I'm doing. And that's the thing. That's where the excitement lies for me. And then once I get comfortable with something, it's like, wow, how can I stretch it a little bit further? And how can I dig a bit deeper? How can I find out more about me and what I'm capable of? Because I believe we've all been given, innate talents and abilities. But if we don't foster them, if we don't nurture them, then we can't fully bring them to fruition. So it's an entire journey of discovery and leaning into who are we, because everybody will have their own nudges and things that they could do really well to listen to. And that's the thing that I encourage in the people that I work with, actually, in all sorts of ways, whether it's as a Toastmaster, where I'm having a little pep talk, maybe with the father of the bride or with a CEO before they go on to deliver a big speech. Lean into being you or whether it's in a coaching conversation with somebody and really trusting in oneself, or trusting in intuition and instinct if I'm working with a head teacher on a safeguarding case. So leaning in to that sixth sense, I think, is really vital.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot for me to think about and reflect on from that answer. That was awesome. And Chris, I'm going to let you ask the next discussion point.
Yeah, I like the sort of interesting culture and whatnot when you go on holiday. Jamie and I were chatting about this. You've just come back from a holiday, haven't you, Jamie? And we're not one for just sitting around the pool, as it were.
No.
Get out there, see the sights, but also
yeah,
get involved with some of the locals and the culture over there.
I think I probably overdo it though. I nearly broke an 18-year-old dancer on this recent holiday I had. We had several. Yeah, seriously.
That was burnout, wasn't it? Burnout.
Yeah. So I'm obviously what you might regard as middle-aged, and I took an entourage with me on this trip to this beautiful tropical island, and they were all staying with us, and so kids' partners and things like that. One of which is an 18-year-old dancer, and I'm climbing a mountain one day where I'm a little bit out of breath, and I look around to say to Evie, how you doing? You okay? And she's about a mile down the mountain, like going, I can't go on. I'm like, hang on a minute. I'm a middle-aged man and you're an 18-year-old dancer. What's going on here? But so perhaps we sometimes push ourselves too much. I think it goes back to a point we were talking about earlier, Trudie. Maybe we just sometimes need to slow down and have some calm and some space.
Maybe she just needed music.
Maybe she just needed a motivational track.
There we go.
Maybe like the Rocky music she needed. To
get up that mountain. Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry, Chris, I interrupted.
Yeah, no worries. No, it was a nice little conversation there. Yeah, so just focusing a little bit on your designated safeguarding lead. Just interested, Trudie, and how that's kind of shaped your understanding of leadership and also community responsibility. If you'd like to just maybe give us your thoughts on that, that'd be great.
The role of a designated safeguarding lead even in the past 10 years, has changed massively to when I first began as what was called in my day, when I started back in 2007, it was the child protection officer. And very much we were expected to be dealing with high level safeguarding concerns, where you were looking at what we would call a section 17 or section 47, child in need or child protection. Whereas now, and I think quite rightly, what professionals in education and in health and other public bodies are required to do is to be cognizant of problems when they first begin to emerge and to start to take action. Because we know, and the stats tell us that the earlier we begin to intervene in the life of a child or a young adult who's experiencing difficulty, the more opportunity there is to be able to help and support them and prevent things growing worse. And so things have changed massively, and I'm so glad that they have, and that there is a much greater emphasis on safeguarding now. But I think one of the things that certainly was not clear to me when I first took on the role of child protection officer as part of my wider remit of being a director of student support services at the college, was just how much is involved in that. And I do remember somebody saying to me in the early days of being, I'll call it a DSL because that's our common parlance now, but you have to be very sort of, touchy-feely and kind of people feel they need to trust to be able to come to you. Yes, and you also have to be an absolute warrior, because there are many behind the scenes confidential battles to be fought day in, day out in order to secure the very best outcomes for that young person. And so it is absolutely not all about being touchy-feely and fluffy. I was always very aware that I needed to look and be the kind of person who could be approached, who would be kind and friendly and compassionate, so that people felt that they could talk to me and tell me some of the most, harrowing things that had happened to them as part of the disclosure process, but also be the person that would then literally kind of get with their mettle and go, right, I'm not having this. Justice and social justice is a very, very core value of mine. And that's where the fight comes in. And I can hear it in my head really, where it's like, I'm not effing having this. This is not the world of fluffiness. This is the world of like, I am going to fight for this child. And when, you know, other professionals who are laden down with other burdens of responsibility, and reminds me of that poem, you know, the funds are low and the debts are high and you want to smile but you have to cry. It's like, no, I'm not letting anybody get away with this. We are going to get the very best outcomes for this person. I will stay on the phone. I will be going to those meetings. I will be banging the drum. And all of that goes on behind the scenes. And very often, you know, the line managers or the chair of governors, if it's linked to a school, don't know that that stuff's going on and the DSL is working with that stuff because it is confidential. And it's a big load to bear, both in terms of having to think through some of the logistics, the power, the energy, the effort, and the emotional labor that goes into it. And it is about being of service to others. It's about fighting for what I believe to be right, fighting for those who are vulnerable, fighting for what really matters in our society, which is young people and vulnerable people, how we treat the least of us in any given situation is how we will be judged. And you can see there are echoes of my kind of moral upbringing coming into it, although I've been on a whole different journey in terms of my my spirituality for another section. But that is where kind of the fight comes from within me. And because I know that fight is very real, the emotional labor is very real, that's why I set up the Essential Safeguarding Company, to make sure that the people who are doing the fighting have all of the support that they need to be able to do that day in, day out, and to be able to really protect children effectively and protect themselves. Because if they're not looking after themselves, they can't then sustainably do the work that they need to do, and that actually in almost every case I've ever come across really desire and feel called to do, because it is a calling, and it's not always the thing that people expect they're going to be doing. As somebody, you know, aspires to become a deputy head or a director of services in a college or a head teacher in a school, they're suddenly like, wow, nobody really told me about all of this safeguarding stuff. I thought I was going to be, you know, leading on the curriculum development, managing budgets, working out the new build. I didn't know I was going to be doing all of this stuff, which is life and death. And it is life and death. And that's, so my calling for the Essential Safeguarding Company is very much about saying, let's make sure that we help those who are helping others. And however we do that, and we do it in a range of ways, with supervision, with coaching, mentoring, support, training, and consultancy, it is vital.
Yeah, it's amazing. And listening to you then, Trudie, I was reminded of the fact that, because we both have an extensive formal career in education, of course, when we were working full-time in education, not just around and with it as we do now. And I remember one of my first senior executive roles in a college. I remember thinking, wow, no one really can prepare you for this, because I had to deal with, as you know, everything from, anybody who's worked in education knows the diversity of the job. You know, you're everything from having to be a police officer to a counsellor to a manager to a, you name it. Yeah. And it goes on. I mean, I you know, there's nothing that can really describe it. You know, it's quite extraordinary, the level of skills, and that's where the external help and support is just critical. And one of the reasons I said that you would, you know, absolute top of the tree when it comes to safeguarding advice and guidance, but in the introduction, is because as part of some of the preparation I was doing for this conversation, I read somewhere that you've personally got experience of, we're talking several thousand safeguarding cases over your career. Mm. So we're talking some pretty extensive experience and insights you've got there, Trudie. Mm-hmm. And you're still smiling, which says you must be a very resilient person. And because it's a very, very sort of challenging role, which brings me on to my sort of discussion question, really, just following on from Chris, which is, you've led lots of different campaigns, and in your answer just now that you were talking about to the previous point, you're clearly immensely passionate about what you do. And that comes across. That's a, you know, I think that's a wonderful thing personally, and I'm sure anybody watching this or reading about it later would agree. But that sort of passion that you bring to some of the campaigns you've led, which has covered everything from community services, healthcare services, some of your political activism comes into this. is there a moment or an example that you can share when it worked, where it went really well? Something that really, because a lot of the time it's a very, very tough battle, isn't it? You sometimes you even take on what you might call a losing battle, often in the kind of areas that you go into, but you do it anyway for all the right reasons. And I think that's a real tribute to your conviction and values and who you are as a person. But are there some examples that you look back on and think, on that occasion, we won, it went right, and it made an impact or made a difference? Is there anything in particular that's made that you hang in your memory as sort of like a moment that really worked out well with that?
Yeah, and some of them are more private matters where I was kind of working behind the scenes, actually. So I'm thinking about how to talk about some of those things, you know, whilst kind of protecting innocence involved. But I'm thinking about a couple of young people working in an education setting who were they were in positions of responsibility and kind of starting to be written off a little bit because they were struggling with how to go about the roles that they've been assigned, and yet they still very much had the locker room, if they like, of their fellow students who'd been involved in electing them. And I thought, if their fellow students really still believe in them, then what these people have to offer and what others are seeing in them, what their peers are seeing, has to be really really valuable. And they've got a lot to give, but it's just not coming out in quite the right way. So one of the great satisfactions in kind of taking it upon myself to ask them if they would like some coaching and mentoring support around how to lead in the way that they desired to lead and show up in the way that they desired to show up and have real impact with the campaigns and the missions that they had at that time. You know, they said yes to my offer of coaching and mentoring, and to see the growth in a very short amount of time in them. But what that then meant in terms of their impact in that college environment was absolutely fantastic. And they managed to shift the dial massively on some issues that people had said would never be possible because of the sort of somewhat conservative realm in which they were operating. And that was deeply satisfying to kind of be behind the scenes on that one, kind of going, you know, they did it. I absolutely loved that. And sometimes it's when we're closest to thinking, I can't see how we're going to pull this one off. That I think those are the moments, those are the times going to just stick with it, because you just never know. And you know, that I've seen in being involved, albeit kind of slightly more on the periphery of a campaign to save a hospital and some of its facilities, and kind of thinking, it seems almost impossible. But then something turns, because so much has been going on, perhaps behind the scenes, where there's been lots of wrangling, lots of negotiations and discussions. Stick with it, because you never know just how close you are. And if we think about the victory that took place in the Euros on Sunday, you know, one of the key, I think, standout features for the Lionesses was that they were down in those successive matches prior to the final, but they just kept going. They dug deep and they won. They dug deep and they won, and they dug deep. Just keep digging, because you never know. And that's one of the things that I've said to my son quite a bit of recent times, as he's been, you know, moving towards finishing his degree and has now just graduated, is keep going for gold. Because if you push for the very best, you might just hit it, or you'll hit something that's very precious, that's close to. You'll do something that's really important in and of itself, and you'll be training yourself in resilience. And that is deeply empowering. We sometimes think that it's all about the end goal, but actually what I've learned so much, and learned viscerally in recent times, is it might look like it's about the thing and achieving the thing, but it's how the process molds us and fashions us as part of the working towards. That's the success. Actually, that's the success in the attributes, the characteristics, what it builds on us. And if we achieve the thing, great, but we get so much closer to achieving whatever the goal is, if we keep on going and keep digging.
100%. Do you know, we could dig into some of those themes as an entire conversation in itself. I was, I one of my takeaways from what you were just sharing, Trudie, is how sometimes it's the journey, not the destination, that is the most valuable part, and that's a whole conversation in itself. But I'm conscious of time, so I'll let Chris ask his next discussion point.
Fantastic, great enthusiasm there as well, Trudie, with your answer. It's superb. Just on, we mentioned this briefly earlier. Obviously, your role in safeguarding, it's quite a stressful role. You're getting involved in some very difficult conversations, and you've obviously got the interests and well-being of the people that you're supporting. How about yourself and the staff that you employ? What is your sort of techniques or tips and guidance for your own well-being, avoiding burnout, avoiding taking everything home with you and just sitting there and, I can't deal with this? What's your sort of role there? How would you deal with that?
Yeah, and it's no coincidence that one of our core corporate values in the Essential Safeguarding Company is joy. And you might think, dealing with safeguarding here. I believe it's absolutely vital, precisely because sometimes we are holding space for some very heavy things that people are carrying. And I would also add to that, the people on the front line are really carrying the heaviest load right now. I did that carrying. I've now moved into the space of supporting those people. And it is less harrowing being one step removed. But every now and again, we'll hear something and I have been in supervision sessions and on the phone to people who phoned up for emergency advice and felt tears coming. Now, that's not about, it must never, ever be about me or anybody who works for the company and our emotional response to things. Sometimes the tears just show us, and we let them fall, that we care, that we still care. No matter how many cases we listen to, we're not inured to them, we still care. So we let them come and we hold space for that, and then shake it off. And we have to shake it off, and we have to allow that to sit in a particular arena. And then for me, every day I go for a walk. I love a walk. And if I don't have my constitutional walk, I feel quite antsy. I have, broken off from meetings to just kind of say with Emma, who works particularly closely with me, so I just need to go for a walk. And then I'm going to carry on this discussion with you, because there is a particular point on my daily walk that I come to. There's a curve. And I very often phone Emma at that point. Like, I've got the answer. She's like, I know where you are on your walk, because that's the point at which the answer comes. You've walked for far enough and long enough. And I always have my darling bunny, Vlad, who is around the house. He's gone from, when I first had him living in a cage, now basically holding the keys to the property because he's so adored. So he's hopping around. He brings joy. Just petting him for a few moments brings release and relief. And it's no coincidence that many schools and colleges are now getting therapy dogs, for exactly this reason. So animals, walks, finding the joy in the small things. My office is surrounded by plants, which literally breathe life into things. I dance every week because I'm an embodiment facilitator as part of my coaching. So movement and literally shaking tension off and out of the body and releasing trauma is vital. And that's a bit of work I'm going to be doing much more with DSLs in the year to come, which I'm really excited about. And I try and have what we call in the coaching world that I operate in a soft play date with myself every week, which doesn't mean going and throwing myself into a ball pit, unless, of course, I want to go and throw myself into a ball pit. But the idea comes from the wonderful artist and writer Julia Cameron, and has been kind of refashioned as a soft play date in the one of many coaching world that I'm in, which encourages us every week to have at least an hour with ourselves to do something different, go somewhere different, read something different, engage with different people. So it doesn't just mean hooking up with your mates, the known world, but go somewhere different, do something different, expose yourself to something different, so that new ideas come in, solutions come in, thoughts, bringing in a different lens to our world. And I do actively seek to do that. So that's partly why I'm always trying new things. Even if I never do them again, it doesn't matter. It's about a taste of something new. And what does it teach me about me that is away from some of the heavier stuff that we deal with?
Gosh, I love that. Yeah, that's you're giving, I'm sure you're giving anybody listening to this a lot to reflect on, Trudie. I'm certainly reflecting on some of your answers there. Also, I'm learning a lot already. I love that phrase, embodiment facilitator. That's not something I've heard of before, but makes sense in the context of what you're talking about. And I echo your thing about going for a walk there. Both Chris and myself have got dogs, so we either Chris or myself, we're often out in the daytime just taking a little break, walking the dog, doing some thinking. And echoing what you were talking about there, Trudie, really, I do some of my best thinking when I'm walking the dog.
Yeah, I agree. So it's pretty much before or after every meeting, I'll have a quick walk around just to kind of partly to focus, but also just to get out there in the wider world as well. It's just it's a good way to just sort of prepare for everything. And also, one of the things we always say, Jamie, is that if we're on a call with somebody, it's not going particularly well or whatever, you don't know what they're experiencing in their life at that point as well. There's a lot of things that can come into a call that might not necessarily be about you or what's going on. There's wider issues as well that you always need to try and take into consideration. But that was fantastic answer. Thank you for that.
So I'm going to move us on to the next sort of discussion theme, and this relates more to the coaching side of your world, Trudie. And apologies if I get the terminology wrong here, because I'm not a qualified coach like yourself. But when you're helping others through a coaching process and encouraging them to explore certain themes, is there a particular thing you think they have to release before they can move forward in that process? Is there something they have to, I don't know whether let go of is the right phrase, or open up about? Is there a particular theme there before they can progress with that? And I also wonder whether you, given your expertise in that field, I suspect you must see or meet people often where you think you would actually really benefit from some coaching. But I wonder how you broach that conversation with somebody, What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I'll start with the latter point first. Sometimes people do not welcome unsolicited advice, and I'm very, very mindful of that. But there was a moment in more recent times where a friend of mine was talking about her thoughts, intrusive thoughts which were happening about an impending trip to which she was really looking forward, but she was also having intrusive catastrophic thoughts. I know, because I've known her for decades, that's not normal for her. It's not usual for her. And I suppose I felt like I might have some information which could be of support to her in that moment. And I didn't want to just, bundle in with, I think it might be this, because what do I know? And that's the thing about coaching, actually, to keep such an open mind. But what I did feel called to say is, I've just got a thought. I wonder if you'd mind me to share it. Okay, so seeking permission. And this is the thing about opening up. And when we're working with a coachee, and this was not a coaching relationship, it's a friendship, but seeking permission is really important, so that actually there is that co-creation of what's happening between us all the time. And on this occasion, she said, no, what are you thinking? And I think some of these intrusive thoughts could be around perimenopause, menopause, actually, which can lead to increased anxiety. And I know somebody who's particularly brilliant in this field who, I wonder if you might like to take a look at some of their stuff. I could send you a link. And she was up for that because it was so softly. And she has got quite a lot out of reading around that. So permission is vital. And in a coaching relationship, everybody has their own stuff that they could benefit from releasing. I know, because this is the thing, coaching, when we are a coach, it starts to shine a real light on us. And sometimes it's really annoying. I can be in a coaching session and some of my coachees are saying things where I'm like, oh, this is so close to my bone right now, what you're saying. But of course, the thought's there and then you put it to one side. But my mentor coach, Kath, has said many times, coaching will hold up a mirror to us and to ourselves. So fundamentally, I have to be perpetually prepared to do the work as a coach in order to be in integrity for life, really. You know, if I'm going to carry on being a coach, that personal growth and development journey goes with me for life. But in terms of a general point for people in coaching, they can open up to releasing any notion of how specifically they will move on or get better, because actually it could be in precisely the way we don't imagine that the answer comes. You know, we talked before about going for a walk. You're like, oh, I know what I'm doing now. I've got clarity. So if as part of that process, they can release expectation around the piece that it is, that can be so powerful. And I was remembering only yesterday working with somebody who believed that her issue was her weight. And as we worked together over a 12-session program, it became very clear the issue was not her weight. Her weight and how she felt about that was a symptom of much deeper issues that were going on for her. And it was actually for her about bringing joy back into her life, which she has done with aplomb. And lo and behold, has released some pounds as a consequence, because the root issue is and has been addressed. And so letting go of expectation, freeing ourselves to see what truly comes up for us is vital.
Love it. Yeah. Wonderful stuff. Chris.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Okay, so you combined a number of things in your career there: consultancy work, coaching, public speaking, toasting even. Toastmaster. So lots of different activities there and roles. How do they complement each other and combine to sort of your overall mission with your work there, both, you know, from a safeguarding perspective mainly? If you could maybe shed some light on that, be fantastic.
Absolutely. You know, it does, all of these different interests do make it a nightmare to write that little subtitle for LinkedIn, you know, Trudie McGuinness, and like, what do you do? What do you offer? Who are you? Like, oh, but what it all comes back to, I believe, is not only the stuff that I am drawn to, and so being in integrity with the things that interest me and exploring those things, it's about connection with people, actually, which is one of my core values. You know, we usually have about 3 or 4 core values, and my lovely friend Sarah Evans is an expert around helping us to get to the very nub of what our core values are. And so for me, it's around connection, compassion, and love. And I love being connected with people. You know, whether that's in coaching, whether it's in safeguarding, whether it's as a Toastmaster or MC for events, it's all about the people. And if ever I get a little bit nervous sometimes about what I'm doing in life, I always remind myself, like, this is not about me. As long as I'm being true to what I'm being called to do in support of others, then it is about them. It's about looking to serve and support them as well as I possibly can. And doing that from a place of compassion. And it doesn't, you know, compassion does not have to mean that we ignore injustice. It just means that we can understand. Sometimes we can seek to understand. We can have a softness in our hearts for how people do what they do, and then say, but no more. And doing whatever we do with love. If ever I get stuck on things and a bit tangled, like, oh, I don't really want to do this, I bring myself back to, how can I do this with love? How can I do it from my heart and not my head, even if it's the tax return? Okay, so if I get this done in a timely way, it will make life an awful lot easier for my accountant and ultimately for me, but actually it takes the pressure off them. So I'm going to do it from my heart. This is a bit boring right now, but I have a good coffee and then I'll go for a walk, and I'm going to do it from my heart.
That has got to be a first. I have never heard anyone say that they do their tax return with love before and with heart. Most people are like, God damn, what am I supposed to tick here? I don't know what the answer is to this. Oh my gosh, can't you make it easier? But you're like, and you're talking to the HMRC with love, which is not something I think they experience very often. I love that. And I absolutely, there's such a common theme as I thought might happen between everything that you do. Which I sort of alluded to at the start, and that it is your authentic passions and values that come through in everything you do, as almost like a moral compass, whether that's your campaigning or your safeguarding business or all the other stuff that you do. What I personally think is a wonderful thing is that it's all work that really is quite remarkable and matters because it's making the world better in some way or another. And I think that's quite an amazing legacy that you are building. And I know that you're on a journey with all of this as well. And some of those themes you were touching on there, Trudie, segue into my next question, really, which is that in all of the work that you do, whether it's political campaigning, but let's focus on that for a moment, sort of the political campaigning you've done to support local services, if I can put it that way, as well as other aspects of mental health and other social services and things. How do your safeguarding and coaching philosophies inform your sort of political vision with that? Because on a purely personal note, from knowing you as I do, you're the sort of political kind of force that I think the world needs, which is for all the right reasons, if I can put it that way. And I know that's a very judgmental thing because everyone's got their own view of what the right reasons are for being in politics and things. But how does that all come together for you with your campaigning? Because it seems to bring together all these things that you're passionate about and your values.
That was a great question. The key thing is that I remain true to who I am. So there are, certain shortcuts that people might advise you to take on different things, even, have snappier conversations with the voters, move on, do this, do it this way. And I think one of the key things in life is understanding sometimes why we're advised to do things in a particular way. And if there's merit in that, great, but don't just blindly do it that way because that's what you're told it should be like. I more than anything these days, this probably comes with age, is I desire to show up fully as myself and not trying to incarnate what I'm told I should be or must be. Because over the course of previous roles I can think of, actually, sometimes said to me, I wonder if you're a bit too kind to be a senior leader in this field or doing that. And I just think, well, if I'm going to need to be heartless in how I go about my work, then I'm not really up for playing. And I do believe I've got something to bring to the pitch, if you like. So I will do it in my way, and I'm not going to be lesser in who I am just to make other people feel more comfortable, and perhaps more comfortable about the compromises that they are making for themselves too. So I think that's at root. That's the connecting piece. So I'm more honest in my conversations now. When people say I'm finding this particular part of this policy or that bit difficult to stomach, yeah, me too. This is actually what I would like to see. This is what I hope and believe we're working towards. But if we're not, we're going to have some pretty robust conversations with people. And there have been some robust behind the scenes conversations in the last 12 months, feeding back on policy. And that's how it should be. It's tough love, isn't it? If we're not talking to the people and the causes with real love and honesty about what we believe and why that matters so much, then we're kind of missing something really vital. So I think that's the thing.
I think that's wonderful as well. And again, bringing in wider knowledge of you as a friend and a colleague over many, many years, I think that, one of your real strengths, if I can put it that way, that I've observed is your consistency when it comes to integrity, and also how you I don't know how quite to phrase this, but I mean, we've had conversations over the years, many times in a professional context, sometimes when we were both senior executives in colleges, for example, where we might have a corridor conversation, and I've had a particular view, and you've challenged it and said, well, actually, there's another perspective on this, and you put it across very diplomatically, but you're quite prepared to stand up to your friends in the sense of speaking truth to people in a very diplomatic, supportive way. But you're not somebody who will bend or change your perspectives to fit in or make life easier, which is what a lot of leaders do, actually, especially with the dynamics of leadership teams and boardrooms and things. But anybody dealing with you can always be assured and know that they're going to get authenticity and some incredibly great advice from your insights and experience, rather than an answer that's tweaked to be more convenient for any situation. And I think you do that, which is a real skill, because actually a lot of people don't do that. Even very senior executives will often nuance their position to make things a bit easier for certain things. And you have a particular skill, I think, about putting across alternative perspectives, and even if sometimes that means standing up in difficult situations to people that might even be your friends or very close to you in different ways, and people can always trust you to have that total authenticity and integrity, and that is a very special thing, I think. So it's a real credit to you.
I think so, but I think being true to yourself is very important.
I tell you what, that means such a lot to me to hear, because I think for a lot of women, and this was certainly true for me, that we get told so much from a young age to be a good girl. And often what being the good girl means is be kind, be nice, be compliant, actually. Do what you're being told to do. And don't push back, and don't be a threat to other people, and to comply. And so it means so much to hear that, because I've been on a bit of a personal mission to not be under the spectre of that control. Being kind to people, for sure, that is great, but not to be compliant just because we're told you should do this, you should do that, sit here, don't talk, don't say this, don't move, don't cause a problem. And sometimes actually we really do need to be the problem, not in and of itself. I'm not actively confrontational just for the sake of. I sometimes think it would make for a more kind of gritty, interesting life if I were. I don't seek out confrontation, but I also know on one or two occasions where because we all have it, where we all make compromises which feel ugly to us, actually, that sitting with a compromise that compromises who we are feels like the most scrappy, horrible place to be within ourselves. And I don't desire that. So sometimes it means having to do the really, really, what can feel very, very awkward stuff of saying, can I just say, can I just in a meager kind of way, but I've got to say it. Otherwise, living with the alternative, I'll hate myself.
Yeah, I think you, for anybody listening to this or reading it in an article that we'll share later, I think for anybody who wants a little bit of guidance, support, or coaching around the art of how to do that you were just describing, should really get in touch with you, because I think you're exemplary at it. There's a famous military strategist who once said, always give your opponent a golden bridge on which to retreat. And I think that reminds me of you in some ways, because when you stand up to people, Trudie, that's kind of what I've seen you do. You do it with such diplomacy and flair that you could get somebody to maybe change their perspective, or at least just have what in another context would be a confrontation, but you do it with such a style that they don't feel it's personal, and they have a golden bridge on which to retreat. And I think that's quite a skill which you could pass on to others. And I think this is why your work is quite inspirational for others, because you do have that authenticity about who you are. And even if that takes you into the uncomfortable territory of speaking truth to power, or even more so, speaking truth to friends, which is sometimes even harder. And you do that with remarkable skill, as much as anyone I've ever met. So I think anybody listening to this that wants a little bit of advice and guidance on how to do that, because it will transform their lives, because it's like that old phrase about the power of no. Power of no. Learning the power of no is a very, very powerful thing, and a lot of people need a bit of help with that as well. But that's we could dig into those topics in great detail. But I'm mindful of time, so Chris, I'll pass back to you.
Sure, yeah, and I think this question leads nicely into that. You've probably covered some of these points there, Trudie, with your last statement. But what would you say is a misconception people often have about leadership in education and public service roles? And how do you challenge that in your own work and maybe get that point across to them?
I had a really interesting moment several months back with a woman I'm coaching, and she's relatively at a relatively early stage in her leadership journey. I believe she'll go far. She's at a relatively early stage, and one of the things she was saying to me is how she imagines leadership from the paradigm in which we live, which is still predominantly informed by past, more masculine cultural paradigm, that leadership is about being kind of like and tough and long hours and drive, and feels like, and the image she used was needing to push this boulder uphill with people behind you, and really looking like they're struggling. It's hard, they're enslaved, and this Sisyphusian notion that, you know, as soon as you push the rock up there, it's going to roll back down and off you go again. And I think what she was really saying is, God, it looks exhausting, and if that's what being a leader is, I don't know that I can do this or even want this. And so we started to then, because that was great. That was a wonderful starting point. So then we can explore, okay, so how do you go about doing the work that you do? And we talked about the ways in which she brings great verve and joy and humor to the work she does, how she's a great ally for people at work, how she champions things, she brings new ideas, she's a real innovator, got great energy, and how she makes a difference for people. And she began to realize all of these things, like, that sounds like a leader. She's like, yes, it does. Yes, isn't that interesting? And how, when we look at the reality of a set of behaviors, I will call them behaviors, because it's all very well saying that people can have an innate certain thing, but if you're not behaving in that way, you're not doing it. You know, leadership is active, and she behaves utilizing all of these wonderful skills and great positive attributes. This is leadership. So it's changing ideas, very static, old-fashioned ideas about what leadership can look like. And sometimes leadership looks like not saying a word, actually letting the person in front of you talk it all out and find their own solution. Holding space. Absolutely.
I'm going to be booking in for some coaching sessions with you shortly, Trudie. And Chris is looking at me like, yeah, you should. Yeah, you offer such wise insights, and I always feel smarter after we've had a conversation, Trudie, which is a real compliment to what you do, I think. And so I can't believe how quickly the time's gone with this conversation, actually, which is probably a sign of a really great conversation, isn't it? When you're getting kicked out of a coffee shop because you don't realize how long you've been in there talking to a friend. It's been that kind of experience today. So you've been very generous with your time, and I'm very, very grateful. So penultimate question from me before I hand to Chris to ask the final question. We don't do this deliberately, but Chris always seems to end up asking the final question in these conversations.
I always get the last question, but you know, I mentioned in the previous conversation we're having on one of our other little podcasts was I said, "What's your favourite colour?" You've already answered that, Trudie. So you're not going to get. It's red. You're not going to get that question. So you're going to get a trickier one now.
Yes, I love how you started the conversation, by the way, Trudie, talking about the Toastmasters and sort of the outfits they wear and stuff. I can imagine sort of being in an interview and it's like, why do you want the position? Well, the outfit, obviously.
Yeah. It's red. Yeah, it's red.
The uniform. Why else would I be here? Wonderful.
Great.
So, penultimate question from me before we wrap up this wonderful conversation. I know that both of us, Trudie, are avid readers and researchers, and we have a lot of different influences and different ways on our lives. But thinking of books and thinkers or experiences that have really shaped your coaching and political philosophies and your leadership style over the past years, sort of which books in particular, any particular books or thinkers or people or individuals that have sort of particularly influenced your style? Because I suspect you're a bit like me in that you have a very diverse set of influences in your life. Any you want to share that have been a particular influence on you?
I honestly, I can't narrow it down to one. And I am deeply grateful for all of the people who have been involved in my journey, full stop. But if I think about my journey in particular, through a lot of change, a lot of career change, moving into being my own boss, which I always desired to do, but was had to deal with my mindset and some of the fears around that. And oh my God, will the world fall down around me? And what if I don't succeed? What if you do? And all of that. And I trained as a certified coach with an organization called One of Many, which specializes in leadership and empowerment for women in particular. And the founder of One of Many, Joanna Martin, is an incredible human being. She, working in co-creation with the content for all that they do at One of Many, with Annie Stoker as their head coach, and Susie Heath, who is their embodiment guru, with whom I've trained as an embodiment facilitator, they feel like they're at the very foundational base of so much that's happened in my life in the past 5 years. And I can think, from a business perspective, Sarah Price and her Actually foundation has been absolutely incredible in supporting me with my journey. Kath Daly, who's my coaching mentor, keeps me on the straight and narrow and growing and developing as a coach. And then all of the people that I work with as well. And for absolutely keeping it real and keeping me in check day in, day out. Not only, my loved ones at home, but thinking about Emma, who is the other key part of the Central Safeguarding Company. She is phenomenal. I mean, her drive and her wit and her sass and her compassion are phenomenal. And I'm so blessed by the people that I'm surrounded by, actually. And so I just deeply thankful. And I loved last week when I was away, giving myself the gift of so much time to read and read and read. And I think reading widely or watching widely what's available on the net in terms of leadership, thinkers, ideas about life, all different aspects of life, and how we learn more about the world around us and the people within our worlds is vital.
Yeah, 100%. Wonderful attitude there, Trudie. And I know, of course, the lady you're referring to, Emma, a wonderful colleague of yours who supports what you do. Very generous with her account as well, because she's clearly let you log in with her account today on this particular conversation. Just for anybody watching this later who might think, he's been calling this lady Trudie all the time, but it says Emma.
Yeah, we might need to do an edit on that. As I saw it just about 10 minutes in and was like, interesting. Yeah. I don't know that Emma would want all of this stuff attributed to her, especially about the love of animals. She's not so keen.
Yeah. But no, I love your philosophy there, if I can put it that way, to life and things. So you're always growing, always challenging yourself, always moving forward. Great resiliency you have about it. But also, I love your openness and honesty about your anxieties, your concerns, like you just touched upon it there about when you started your business and what if it fails, but then also flipping it to, well, what if it succeeds? And all that journey you go through, because it's tough. It's a tougher road to choose. It's always much easier to take the safe path. But then I love your appetite for life and how you were never going to be somebody who would just take the safe, easy path. You would always throw yourself into the unknown and throw yourself into uncertainty and embrace it as a learning process to grow. And I think that's wonderful, and I think that's why you're so influential on the people around you and such a positive force on the people around you. And again, for anybody listening to this or reading about it later, I can say from direct personal experience, and hopefully as has come across in this conversation, that from the moment anybody starts collaborating with you or gets to know you as a friend or as a professional colleague, it will enrich and transform their lives in all of the ways that they're seeking to do. So I strongly recommend anybody who, if this conversation resonates with anybody later, any of the themes have been touched upon, reach out to Trudie or ourselves, and I'll connect you directly to Trudie afterwards. And it will be a really remarkable experience. And thank you, Trudie. No further questions from me, Your Honor. I'm going to leave the final question to my long-term buddy, Chris.
Yeah, we've done a colour one, so we'll have to choose something else. So just a bit of a looking into the future now, a little bit, Trudie. So your legacy, what do you hope to leave across the sector there that you work in? And just a little bit maybe about how you're able to stay grounded with all the great work that you've done. You know, you've pursued so many incredible interests and career choices. Just a little bit on that as well, because you do seem extremely humble. It's lovely to meet you properly for the first time today. So yeah, your legacy and just how you stay grounded and keep it real.
Oh gosh, what a question. I would love, in terms of the Essential Safeguarding Company, for it to be absolutely accepted as de facto that DSLs must have supervision and support in the roles that they undertake, that they need and deserve all of the coaching, mentoring, time for offloading, for guidance, that makes such a massive difference when bearing the emotional labor that they do. And I would love, if people think back to, you know, who was she and what did she do, that that I kept things, you know, kind and with a smile on my face, that we had some giggles along the way, because I do believe that we're all slightly ridiculous. I'm slightly ridiculous, and we have to laugh about these things. So in terms of keeping it real, I mean, I only have to look at the mess that surrounds my desk on a daily basis to know that, you know, there's still quite a lot of work to be done on some of my habits. So yeah, keeping perspective on things and keeping great friends, great people in our lives is so important.
What a way to end. Wow, wonderful. And echo that. Yeah, beautiful sentiments there, Trudie. It falls to me to wrap this up now formally. We could have kept this going, I think, for the rest of the day, actually, because some of the themes and insights you shared are so sort of powerful that they're entire topics in themselves, in my opinion. And because your interests, if I can put it that way, are so diverse, whether it's the Toastmaster, whether it's the coaching, whether it's the Essential Safeguarding Company, and all the other things you do, we could have spent a whole session on any one of those, I think, and maybe we will at a future point. But for now, I just want to say, on behalf of all of us at Sea Learning, myself, Chris, a huge thank you for agreeing to give up some time in your incredibly busy schedule to take some time out to do this. But it has been an absolute privilege, and we're sort of doing these things as well. Just, it goes back to how you sort of started some of the conversation, really, about taking a bit of time out to just talk to friends, colleagues, partners, and stakeholders, and so on, who are doing incredible work and remarkable things, and without any set agenda, because nobody's sponsoring these conversations. We're open to talk about whatever we want. There's no sort of sales pitch or anything going on in these conversations. But I think they've been all the more powerful for it, and they've been really valuable conversations. Like today has given me so much to think about, and I'm sure anybody reading about this later will have some real food for thought about some of the topics we've been discussing. But you've been incredibly generous with your time, Trudie. So huge thank you. We'll wrap this up now, but if anybody wants to reach out to Trudie to dig into any of these themes in any more detail, Trudie's very easy to track down on LinkedIn. or you can reach out to Trudie in a range of other ways, or ourselves, and we'll put you in contact straight away. But Trudie, thanks a million for the conversation today.
Thank you. An absolute pleasure.
Thank you.